my god!
Unbelievable scenes yesterday at Norway Chess Round 6 as young Gukesh D, reigning world champion, took down the world #1 Magnus Carlsen. How would today play out in Round 7? Well, Magnus turned up a bit dejected, made a quick non-fighting draw with Hikaru. Even though he had the white pieces, he did win the Armageddon, but then it became all eyes on Gukesh D. This fight that he had with Arjun was legendary. They're both top 5 players. What a game. And it's spicy right from the opening because Arjun plays pawn d6, the Pierce defense. You rarely see that at the top level. Love to see it though. Gukesh takes the center, knight f6, knight c3 defends, and you can go e5, very main move, but Arjun goes for a different one, g6, also mainline stuff. By the way, if you want to learn some openings, check out Lotus Chess. I've been using it to practice my own. That's how you can get these kind of crushing lines inside systems like this. Really cool app, free to get started, link down below. Now to the game, knight f3 played, and this bishop tucks into bed here. Bishop c4, aggressive, castles, and h3 is prudent. Sometimes bishop g4 is very annoying. You know, there's a dark squared strategy going on here. This knight's a good defender. So we see now an absolute whirlwind of a move. Where does this come from? It's knight takes on e4. A brilliancy it's given, but okay, if captures, here's the point, you push d5, you do win your piece back, but how about this? We don't see captures. We get bishop takes on f7, 2 brilliant moves at once. It's too much for some onlookers. Now the rook recaptures, knight takes here, and d5, and you should drop back to g3, but it's only a level game according to the all-powerful Silicon Overlord. But we see knight to c3 po, not the most precise, blocking this pawn, doesn't do anything to stop bishop f5, and black's now doing great with pawn c5. And suddenly the board is opening up for the bishop pair, which black has, and the king's already castled. So castles is played and now takes on d4. Knight recaptures, and it's Arjun that's played an Uno Reverso. You know, rewind, white had the centre with 2 pawns. Now look at it. Black's got the centre with 2 pawns and the bishops. Now we get knight c6, the knight's hit twice, and you're well advised to retreat. You know, if you take, you build that big black centre. Bishop e3 was running into e5, so this is the way to go. Pawn's now under fire twice. e6 is ugly, so's bishop e6, so instead we see this one, thrusting, taking the space, and look at this. It's a Black Widow spider. Love a centralized queen. The knight's going to drop, so we get Chewbacca's favourite move, the Wookiee one. Now pawn h6, covers some knight jumps, but it does weaken the king. You know, this is the drawback of Arjun's opening here. We see pawn c3 now. Now, it isn't necessarily the most engine-approved way of playing, but it's interesting. There's a pin, so of course you can't take. Bishop f5 is actually strong, because if knight g3, there are these sacrifice ideas, blah, blah, blah. But okay, not played. Pawn d3 pushes on. Now, it allows queen b3, a strong way to trade the ladies. But here, Gukesh whispers, do you even rook lift, bro, as he attacks that pawn on d3. It's an ambitious move. They're both ambitious players. Bishop f5 prevents the capture of this pawn, or the knight's going to drop off the board. So it drops back to g3, hits the bishop, but rook d8. Excellent move. Ignores, because if you capture, pick up the bishop pair, then actually pawn takes is strong. You're building this connect 3, and that is ominous. So not played. Instead we get bishop d2. I mean, it's a very ugly looking move. Seriously stinky cheese here. Bit like parmesan. Stinky but necessary, because at least it does blockade the pawn. So e5 is played. Queen b3, again strong, but now anyone for a knight maneuver, that's a nerdy chess notation joke, because this one's stumbling back, and after e4, this is the point. But it's so risky. You can actually play queen c5 immediately, creating the pin. It's a pawn sacrifice, and there's this incredible slow motion attack. Knight c4 was a threat. This sort of thing going on, I mean, it really is just carnage on the dark squares. So incredible, these ideas that the engines find, but not played. This is human chess. We see captures, knight takes back. Now there is a threat to win the black bishop pair, because this time if you take with the pawn, well, not so strong. The e pawn's gone, you don't build the connect 3, so it drops back to e6. Knight e4's a great centralizing move, and now knight e5 does the same, threatens knight c4, so captures is played. Bishop takes back, and queen e1 sets up lots of discovered nasties on this e-file, and we see a real nice fight back now from Gukesh. Best move for Arjun is dropping back this bishop. It gets dangerous down here, but missed. He stacks the rooks on the f-file, and it allows knight g3 with these incredible complications. You're hitting two bishops, right? And there's no rook f5 to cover, or the knight's taking. So how to fight back? Best move is rook f2, because if you give the queen for two rooks, you get murdered on the dark squares after bishop f4. Not good. If instead you try, what was the other one I was looking at? Not sure, but knight e4 is the top move. Well, then you can either just drop back to f5 and cover things and repeat, or you can get ambitious with bishop takes on h3. You know, there are checkmating ideas. It's ninja stuff. This was best, but not played. What do we see? Bishop f4. Now it looks like it's working, because yes, white takes here, but then black takes here, and the queen's overloaded. You can't take the bishop and defend the rook. But here's what Gukesh has seen. He now slams through on g6 with check, so he's won a pawn, king h7, and now again, it's not about capturing the bishop, because then the rook drops and you're in exchange down. It's about this brilliant move, and it's queen e6, offering the exchange of the queens, and you can't avoid it because of all this pressure down here. Well, or you're just going to take the black queen as well. You're just forced to take the queen. You could flick in a check first, because if queen takes, then king takes here. But this was played. They're both roughly equal games. Now we see bishop f4, and after knight f1, would you look at this? Yes, the bishop's bouncing round, but is this pawn now an asset or a liability? It's got to be defended. The knight bounces into the game. There's a check. You can't yet go rook f2 very well, because knight e4, knight f6 is on the way, going to fork Vegas. So king g7 keeps an eye on those ideas, but now knight f3 covers the entry points. The rook's attacking the pawn now, and this is just great for white. The knight's doing well, it's hopping, and you're a pawn to the good at the end of the day. Rook f6 is played. It's a bad move. You can actually exchange those rooks and win this pawn very soon after, but missed. Rook e4. We're not going to stop now for every miss and question mark. We'll be here all day. You could slow play this position with white, but knight e5, the more enterprising move. Gukesh wants to play. Now we see rook g4 check, and he really drives this king into a box now. First he forks, the rook saves itself, more checks on the board, and after this king runs back, we now get this tickle effect here. The king should step up to e6 technically, keeps an eye on knight e5, but it steps back. Understandable. More tickle right under the armpit. Everyone's having a great time, even Kasparov. Now the knight steps in, hits the rook, it slides to e6. Don't blunder your knight. Bit more tickle. They're just past time control. They only get 10 seconds a move. It's an absolutely brutal time control at Norway chess. The rooks leave the board, king recaptures, and bang. Look at that. 2 pawns now to the good, and what 2 pawns they are. I mean, it's an incredible structure. This is a defensive octopus that Stocktopus can be proud of. This is tough now for Arjun. Everything's under lock and key. Soon we see some expansion before Arjun can get too comfortable. I was about to say Gukesh. And now after captures on a5, if you take with the bishop, you're running into rook f5 check. I mean, your own knight's loose, but anyway, Arjun didn't want a part of that, so he checks like this. King steps up, and now this one marches in, and this is the big source of counterplay. That black king is very active. Watch how it now starts marching, because Arjun goes for this pawn, not technically best, knight e4 preferred, and now rook d6 defends. We get knight e3 check, king b3 played, don't take the pawn, you were running into discoveries here, and now knight f5, the rook saves itself, and king g4. It's a nice idea, but it's slow. Another pawn is gobbled, king h5, and now this is the moment where if you go king b3, it's very dangerous. This is serious counterplay because the b pawn runs fast. This is just one sample line and it's roughly level-ish. Okay, white is a bit better, but this is dangerous. Anything could happen. Black could certainly draw this game, but not played. Rook c6 goes for the pawn, but now check. And here you can't go to b3 or you run into knight d4 check with a fork on the rook here. So king here. Now the pawn pushes. We're not going to keep pausing because this is the critical moment. The bishop needs to stay on this diagonal with the pawn here. Whoops, that's a drunken arrow. Not that I'm drunk, but it looks like one. Bishop c3 is played. Now we get rook d5 and you just can't get back to the key diagonal. So king a4, but look at this. It's just so slow now. Black covering stuff, winning the c pawn, but Gukesh has got these g pawn and h pawns running now. Look at how powerful the knight works with them to send them down the board. Few spite checks, but what to do? They're both attacked. g5. This knight now covering. I'm too soon. Couple checks first. Gukesh not doing it for the threefold repetition, but for the time. And look at the march of the pawns. It's epic. A check. There goes the b pawn, but not before rook e3, forcing the rooks off the board. Otherwise the bishop would drop. And now don't blunder your bishop. Saved, but look at this. Now you have to give it up. That one was in the delivery suite. The king marches over here, trying to get rid of the knight before running the pawn, but knight a5, and we see resignation. Because if you push the pawn, knight takes, and this one's just running, and if you try and run the king round, well, look how slow this is. Here's one sample line. How the game may have ended, right? Something like this. Wouldn't be surprised at all if we saw this on the board. Just one sample finish there. Incredible game between these two young players. What a battle. Gukesh D just shaking up the chess establishment here. Soaring up the leaderboard. What a hot tournament it is. Fabi also winning today. Thanks very much for watching and have a look at the video on screen if you missed the incredible Magnus drama. Thanks a lot and see you soon. Cheers.